Taylor.
How's it going?
Oh, pretty good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we doing another podcast. This one's a little different. Have you noticed?
This is, yeah.
Okay.
It's gotten a little bigger.
A little bigger, a little different.
The space is so much better than your living room. No offense.
And we don't have the radiator tinging in the background.
We could if we turn it up. We could get that for you.
Oh, maybe.
We could.
Yeah. Chen sound, is that okay? No. That's better? Okay. So yeah, welcome to the Artsy Dudes. This is our first video podcast. We've been doing this for over a year now, but it's been mostly audio. So unfortunately now the public has to look at us while we speak as well. So sorry. But yeah, I'm excited. We are here at Sparrow Art Space, located in Bridgeland in Calgary. And it is our new mothership, our home for podcasts from now on. So I'm excited. My name, as always, is Taylor Gladu. I'm one of the hosts of the Artsy Dudes. And with me is Ryan. Want to say hi to the people?
Hello, everyone.
There we go. Today we are joined with two incredible artists. They are puppeteers, and if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves to the audience.
Yeah, I'm Jenny Dale Stables.
Oh, I'm Tia DeLauria.
Nice. So what brings you guys to Sparrow?
Yeah, we wanted to put on a puppetry residency that would welcome people of all ages to come in and explore the art of puppetry. At the heart of that is our belief that play is a human birthright, that play fosters creativity across all art forms. And so we've set up this space where everything is touchable, where people can come in and explore making puppets and performing them and creating stories and hopefully finding a new way to connect as family and as friends, because I believe that puppetry also has a tendency to bring people together and collaborate. Yeah.
What about you, Tia?
What was the question?
What brings you to Sparrow?
Right. Well, like Jenny said, the idea of a puppet residency was really neat, especially as this month is more or less the Festival of Animated Objects here in Calgary, so there's a lot of puppet-themed events, and having a space where people could not only attend workshops, but also experience and play and create their own, as like they're also within the confines of other events, seemed like a really great idea, because sometimes you go see an event, but then you don't know what to do after that if you want to make them or explore that avenue. So yeah, came here to show the behind the curtain level of older child adult puppets, where they're hidden at the back of the room above child eye level. So I wanted to show that version of puppetry, because a lot of people really think puppets, they think Sesame Street. And
well, Jim Henson comes to mind off the bat, right?
Which especially in Calgary, we have Fraggle Rock here.
Right.
So it's a huge thing. Everyone thinks Jim Henson puppets. But Jim Henson even wanted a show called Sex and Violence. So I decided I wanted a show about metal. And I come making metal puppet shows.
Amazing.
Yes.
What got you started in puppetry to begin with? What was your catalyst?
Want me to go first?
Yeah.
I can go first.
Keep the order.
Pardon me. So for me, I've always been interested in, when I first started to create my own art as a visual artist, I think I was trying to create art for other people, or what I thought other people would like. So I was doing things like landscapes and portraits and this is art. And then I finally, about 12 years ago, I finally said, I got to give myself permission to do what my heart is saying. And I started to do art that was fun and whimsical. I started to make little characters and dress them up in clothing, and then I started to write stories to go along with them. That evolved into writing and illustrating books. My work has always been very child-centered. I used to teach kindergarten, and I have a Bachelor of Education in addition to my BFA. And And I just really wanted to celebrate and create art that kids love. And about 6 years ago, I was writing and illustrating my book called Bolts, about a little robot who gets separated from his boy. And I was creating these found object assemblage sculptures to go along with that story. And I kept thinking, I want those characters to move. I want my sculptures to move. And I didn't connect the dots that what I really wanted was puppetry. And it wasn't until about 3 years ago I was taking a course to get my certification as a therapeutic arts practitioner. And the idea of puppetry came up again. And it had come up for years. It would just pop up and I'd be like, I'm not a puppeteer, I'm not a puppeteer. And then all of a sudden during this class, I actually had one of my dolls and I was puppeting the doll. And I looked around, I saw my sculptures, I saw my artwork, I saw my stories, and I went, I'm a puppeteer. Why did it take this long for me to figure out that all of these characters and all of the stories and wanting to bring movement and that's puppeteering. It just took that long for me to have that aha moment. But as soon as I had that aha moment, it was like a bolt of lightning just went right through me. And I knew that I really wanted to pursue this art form and do it in a really respectful way, like respecting the art form and respecting those who came before me. So I wasn't about to jump up and say, guess what? I'm a puppeteer now. Like I knew I needed to reach out to the community. I needed to find mentors. I needed to, I took some courses to learn wooden puppets and carving. I've also been trained by Puppet Stuff Canada, Brendan James Boyd and Reese Scott, who were puppeteers for the Frego Rock. And they hired me as a roving performer. So they taught me how to do roving puppetry with Muppet-style puppets. Juanita Dawn has brought me into her studio, and she does a lot of tabletop puppets, similar to the wooden carved puppets that I do. And so she's been mentoring me as well. So I still consider myself a budding puppeteer. I think out of respect for all of the artists out there who work in puppetry, I don't want to go and say, I'm such a pro. But I think you have to start somewhere. And that focus in my practice has now been going on for 3 years. I think I'm getting close to saying that, yeah, I can step up with you guys maybe. But I'm still out of respect, really taking in learning from the community.
Right.
Yeah.
I got into puppetry accidentally. I went to art school. I also have a bit of a background in carpentry and graphic design. So I applied for a job with the Calgary Animated Object Society thinking it was a production job. Like I can make things, I can do that, I'll apply. I was kind of just applying to jobs like a mediocre white guy, and I didn't really look at the qualifications. And I got the job. And she's like, all right, do you want to make a puppet show? And I went, is that my job? And they're like, do you want to perform this one? I'm like, is that also my job? So I was commissioned to make my first puppet show. It's a suitcase puppet show. Most of my puppet shows are, they're kind of self-contained within a puppet show. Either I've built them into the suitcase or I can just grab it and go. And this has given me a lot of opportunities to make several puppet shows now that we perform a lot at festivals. So things like we'll be at Folk Fest, we'll be at, we'll go to Nanton, we'll go to Beakerhead, stuff like that. And it kind of is I got really excited after the first couple months because it's finally a job that uses what I thought were all of my useless skills. And now I get paid to make tiny furniture out of popsicle sticks and instrument case foam, and it's gone great. So like a lot of artists who go to art school, you kind of come out and you're like, great, now what do I do? It's been incredible finding a way to use all my skills and my backgrounds, and it's really also such a good community that I stay in it. And it's such a welcoming and encouraging one that it's kind of hard to get out of it now. So that's how I got into it.
I had a question about just like meeting you guys right off the bat. it seems like there's a whole bunch of different styles of puppeteering. Like you just mentioned the suitcase thing. Is that like an actual like category of puppeteering?
Kind of. There's it's a lot of miniature puppets. There's entire festivals just dedicated to like street performing and puppets like that. So my boss really loves talking about the puppet festival in, I think, Charleville, France. She's always like, "Okay, but you guys gotta go. You guys gotta go. I take my kids. I take everyone. We've gotta go." And we're like, "It's every 2 years. Deep breaths. We can't go right now. It's not this year." But there's entire festivals. One of the people in my company who really like hits it hard is started as a summer student many years ago, and they kind of created the Suitcase Theater Arcade. Sometimes you might see it at a festival, and it's called Itsy Bitsy. But yeah, it's a way to perform puppets, but it involves a lot of different kind of puppet techniques. So a lot of people look at my puppet shows and they go, "You have 4 different kinds of puppets in this show," because you just do what you can use. So yeah, the mini puppets is definitely a type, because you get the marionettes, which everyone thinks of instantly, like the Pinocchio strings on top. You get the tabletop ones, which you kind of perform down at the table, and it's more like down on a table. There's rod puppets. There's so many kinds, and it really just it's kind of what kind of puppet and where are you performing it. So.
And I think if I could add to that, one of the definitions that that I've come across for puppetry is an inanimate object that is animated in front of an audience. So an object that moves in front of an audience. And I think that is probably one of the most encompassing definitions of puppetry, because it is such an expansive and such, there's so much depth to puppetry. And there's so many traditions, like worldwide traditions that we could trace back for centuries, right? And all of those have come to influence, and it's still evolving, which I think is amazing about puppetry. Like I remember when I was studying painting in my undergrad, and one of the professors said, "Oh, don't go into painting because everything's been done." I don't think you could say that about puppetry. It hasn't been done yet because it's so
expansive. Like you'll get people making 40-foot tall dragons that breathe fire and walk in parades. You'll get
where
online. But there is also. I think there's like they travel.
Yeah, there's a Newcastle.
Because they've been in Montreal. I've seen them in other places online. And then I think a couple of years there was one that like climbs up a building. And then you'll get, like Jenny mentioned, the more traditional ones. So you'll get like puppets and masks. We've done. Last year we did an exhibition on more traditional mask making and how it comes to contemporary artworks of current artists. And you'll get people who have these puppets in Mexico, and you wear them on your shoulders, and they're like an extra 6 feet on top of you, and you just like walk back and forth, and the hands just slap everybody as you walk. But it's very traditional. It's very fine. It's traditional. We're okay.
And that's also a good point, that like there's so much crossover between mask and puppetry that we often put them into that umbrella of puppets, because it is so related. And actually, Tia and I both did a mask workshop this summer with Wonderheads, learning how to...
Wonderheads out of Victoria.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Awesome.
A lot of our work and our community, especially with the festival, it's kind of everything leads up to the festival, but it's a big combination of mask, puppetry, and animation. So we get a lot of people who do a lot of everything and a lot of crossover. And then we throw some clowns in, because why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
Who doesn't like some clowns?
Right?
Children.
Oh, some people
Some adults.
like clowns.
Some adults. Yeah.
Clowns are fun.
I find it very fascinating how you both kind of stumbled into it in your own way, and how engaging in that play, and now you're teaching kids to do the same thing, like behind the scenes. Like it's not just something you're watching, like you can do this too.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I think I watched this little reel on Instagram a few days ago with John Cleese, and talking about creativity and how it's, a lot of people tell themselves, "Oh, I'm just not creative." And he said it's yeah, it really stuck with me what you said. He said it's about engaging in play.
Yes.
Like that's basically all creativity is.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I just found that fascinating to pass on to the kids and show them what's behind the scenes.
Absolutely. And I think that breaks my heart. I hear that a lot, is I don't have a creative bone in my body. Oh, look at what you can do. I don't have a creative bone in my body. And you never hear that from kids, by the way. I walk into a kindergarten classroom, I say, who here is an artist? Every single hand will go up because they know the truth. We are human, we are creative. That is part of what makes us human. We are all creative. And it makes me sad that somewhere along the line, these adults have been told that they're not creative people. And it really, that hits home when I think about the work that I do as a teaching artist. I want to empower every single person that comes into my workshops or my classrooms. I want to empower them in knowing that you are innately creative. You can do it. And creativity isn't about creating something perfect. And I think that's what happened, right? They had this idea of perfection and kind of like what I was trying to do for years and years, throughout my BFA and after that. I'm going to make something that everybody else is going to like this landscape. That wasn't what my heart was telling me. We all have a voice, and it's really about just listening to that voice and trusting it. So, yeah.
Something I like to tell people when they do that is it's not that you're not creative, it's that you just need to learn to appreciate what you're able to do. Mm-hmm. And then you throw out people like Basquiat. People don't think that's very good because it's just, scribbles and stuff, right? And it's like, yeah, but he thought he was good. Once you understand what you're able to do is good, you can elaborate on that, you can keep practicing, and you'll get to a point where you think you're great. So it goes a lot with what Jenny said, where people told them it's not good. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, if you just learn that line is just a creepy line and not a straight line, then you'll be fine.
And I think too, the other thing is that sometimes when we teach art, and this is something that is really my teaching for me is just as much of an art form as this stuff I produce. What I am constantly trying to do is make sure that when I teach a class and I teach a workshop, I am not laying down rules and step-by-step procedures that have to be followed. And I understand why some teachers want to do that, because it gives them a sense of control, and they feel that if your students can create what you have taught them to create and create it to the T, that they will feel successful. But I do not believe that that's what makes us feel like artists. I believe that if we give them tools and strategies, but the opportunity to expand and take different avenues, that's what gives them power, and that's what gives them belief in their creativity.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that, because over the podcasts we've been doing before, we've met with multiple different artists from different disciplines, and there seems to be a trend that every artist within different disciplines comes to that realization. One is what you mentioned was about play. Mm-hmm. If you talk to actors, they're thrilled that they get to, their livelihoods is to play pretend. Mm-hmm. And the best actors are the ones that really go into that, right? But also, it's we've mentioned this multiple times with different people, especially when it comes to music and stuff. And you mentioned about art. It's well, you were doing art that you thought other people would want, and it's the same with music. It's if we create something that's we think is a masterpiece, then nobody likes it. Yeah. But it's actually a really well-written thing, and then or we just do a 3-chord pop song, and everybody's like, that's fantastic.
It is funny,
but a part of our soul dies a little.
It's funny that weird progression we get into where we're kids and we don't care what people think. It's just, hey, I like this. Mm-hmm. And then we get into this weird space where it's people pleasing. And I only feel within the past few years with myself, like some people may not like what I create, but I like it.
Yes.
And if I like it,
Yeah.
there's at
Yes.
least 2 others that
Yeah.
will too. I just
Yeah.
gotta find them.
Yeah, and that exact thought was what changed my career as an artist. And actually, you know, when I started to do those illustrations that were like these funky little characters, I thought, you know what? I don't need to be in that gallery. I like this. This gives me joy. I love to scribble. I love to have fun. I love to just be whimsical. And as soon as I said, yeah, screw that, I like this. That's what it made a huge difference. People see your joy.
Yeah.
They get that energy from it. So.
Spreading the good vibes.
I had a question about your process when it comes, because you were a writer. You wrote initially, and what to expand on your writing? What like drew you to puppetry? Because like a lot of writers, like I tend to go towards film because I like the visual aspect of it. And I know some writers that, you know, get, they're novelists and then they get drawn into like graphic novels, for example. But what about that aspect of performance did you like most about telling your stories?
Well, I think not only am I a writer, but my writing starts with images. I think in images first. So I can see the images of this story that I want to create, and then the writing kind of evolves from that. And I think that puppetry is like if you could imagine your illustrations in a book just coming right out and popping out of that was that idea that I wanted to carry over, was that you could still create these characters and have this. It's so similar to illustrating, creating a puppet. I think that was the crossover that I saw, was these illustrations that you've created and that you've thought about the shape and the form. It just seemed to naturally bring itself into puppetry. And I will admit as well, my doll collecting. Also, yeah, she's laughing because she's seen it.
I've been to her house.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane.
It's insane.
So I
Just a couple?
No,
a couple rooms.
no. And I'm like, I think this needs to. You know, I'm 45 now, and I'm like, you know what? It's coming out. So I've always loved dolls, and even when people were, you know, even my teens, when everybody stopped playing with dolls, I'm like, yeah, I kind of still like my dolls. Really love my dolls. And not just for display, but like they have personalities and names and birthdays and all that sort of great stuff. But puppetry was also that, and I actually, when I was in university, not in my official coursework, but one of my dreams was to make dolls and toys and stuffies and create these characters, even back then, even in my 20s. However, I soon realized sewing and like the technical craftsmanship of it doesn't lend itself to my artwork. My artwork is more a little bit like fluid. So I don't worry about the craftsmanship. And I also realized I didn't want to sew 40 versions of the same character. So the idea of puppetry, that every little guy can be unique. And with puppetry, you're constantly problem solving as well. So you're like, okay, this is how I started it, but we got to go a different avenue. So yeah, my love of dolls is actually also what brought me towards creating these characters that can move and be my instant little friends.
I think it's actually kind of funny, since you brought up your dolls, how our various collections reflect in our puppetry. Because you love dolls, your stuff's very kid-focused, your puppets are very cute, everything's very doll-like. I collect action figures that have lost their accessories. So one of my favorite things is a Leatherface action figure that doesn't have a chainsaw, so he just looks like he's going for a haughty jaunt all the time. And now I make puppet shows that have snail mail, snails in them, and metal puppet shows, and it's just interesting to see how those like precursor collections of things
Yes.
have expanded in the wildest ways.
Yes.
Like, metal and tearaway dresses with secret Iron Maiden shirts. So.
I was gonna ask you about that because your style of puppetry and storytelling is
Very
unique.
different than hers.
It's very unique.
I also get told very unique as well. My boss is like, why? Where did you come up with this? I've never seen people with pop-up books as scenery.
Yeah,
So-
I was gonna ask you about that. It's like obviously like you use music a lot as influence for your storytelling, but how like what's the process of like why the fly? Why that song?
Well, when I was first doing a puppet show, I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never made a puppet show. And I wanted to make a show about frogs because I was in my 30s going through a frog phase.
As one does.
As one does,
Yeah.
when you collect things like I do. And then somebody said that one of the easier ways to start is to pick a song, go through there. So I picked a song. I chose Somebody's Watching Me because if it's about a frog, I can make it about a fly and a secret frog. Because at the end, the frog eats the fly. And that's like kind of the punchline to the story, that it's been about frogs the whole time, which is most of my conversations. With the pop-up book thing, I didn't understand how to make scenery changes so small, so I made a 7-spread pop-up book, and the fly just fits in, and he goes through his day through the pop-up book, and then dies, because that's nature. But most of my, I have one that's not pop-up, not song-based, and even then we started with a song. We wanted to do a metal show for adults, for seniors specifically, in case we did tours of seniors' homes again. And we found a really cute song called Never Alone by Terror, but you probably wouldn't know what the lyrics were, so we gave it subtitles, and then we gave the puppet hearing aids to validate the subtitles, and it kind of just keeps expanding from that. It's really easy to start from a song, though, if you're getting ready. If you're starting out, because it already has all the scenery, it already has the imagery, you just have to make the jokes.
I love how you said the kids are fine with like the fly being eaten by the frog.
Yeah, they think it's great
They're
because,
just like, put him out of his misery. He's not even enjoying
well,
life.
it's also just, nobody likes flies, so that helped. But also, the way I did the frog is I put a party blower inside and then attached it to a pump, like a little air tube and a pump. So the kids just love how the tongue pops out and then eats the fly. So the kids don't care the fly's dead. They just want to play with the air pump at the end, which helps me continue my pattern of something dying in most shows. So, but that's just, a fly gets eaten by frog. It's just nature. It's not Sesame Street. I'm sorry. I don't know if I could do Sesame Street.
It's a soft touch of reality for kids to grasp.
Yeah.
It's healthy.
My next one, I was listening to a really nice song by Badly Drawn Boy called The Shining, I think.
Oh, love him. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's great
because I had a
tune.
French horn case. I asked my in-laws, do you have any extra suitcase? They went, no, we have extra French horn cases. And I went, sure. So I found a French horn song and that song. And for some reason, I thought something's dying in a tar pit. That's what this song is telling me. So a baby mammoth was going to die in a tar pit, but I made a giant land sloth to save it. Because not everything has to die. So, yeah,
Well,
it's
Actually. Sorry.
not in well, because the tar pits, I started researching the Pleistocene and what kind of bones and fossils have been found in the La Brea tar pits. So that's where I got the land sloth and the mammal. So I also just kind of tie in a lot of science and nature stuff to my shows because I like bugs and science and metal.
Bugs are cool.
I'm just here, just doing my best, liking stuff and making stuff out of it that doesn't make sense, which is why it's great.
Fantastic.
It doesn't have to make sense. It's just got to be fun.
So I wanted to ask you guys about, we kind of touched on it a bit before, but some projects that are going on this month and other festivals or anything that you might be involved with that you might want to tell people about. You did mention something while we were on the break. Do you mind just...
Yeah. So for the next 2 weeks, or actually they've extended it a bit, so we'll just say the whole month. This is the month of the Festival of Animated Objects. So there are numerous exhibitions and shows and workshops happening throughout this entire month. And one of the things that is happening is an event called the Dolly Wiggler Cabaret, which is like a puppet slam. So people come in and they have 3-minute performances. It's an adult-only audience. So things get interesting. This will be my first time performing in it. And I more or less stumbled across it, and that was actually when I met Tia, because I was looking for ways to become part of the puppet community, and I came to this puppet jam thinking, oh, I'll bring a puppet and see what this is about. They're like, oh yeah, we're getting some ideas ready for the Dolly Wiggler. You're going to be in it. I said, oh, okay, I'm going to be in the Dolly Wiggler.
We kind of just decide, we'll go, hey you're in. Apply, do it, dare you.
Yeah.
Go on stage.
Yeah.
We'll give you money.
So because it's an adult-only audience, it's a step in a very different direction for me. It's still going to be, it's still me. So unlike
Your darker side, though?
I wouldn't say darker side. I think it's still a little bit sweet, but there's a little, oh, Jen, oh, what is your old lady puppet doing? Oh, like a little like.
It's super cute still.
Yeah, I know. It is still super cute. Like I'm not totally breaking away from that sort of, I hate to use the word brand, but I guess brand that I've become known for. But I wouldn't show it to kids.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Tia, you have something in that as well?
Oh no, I have something in everything else. Because I work with Chaos, which started the festival. So that's my year-round job, is performing with them. So within the festival, I co-curate the exhibition that's happening at Rotary Park for 2 months at the end of April, and then also at C Space until March 16th. That's a 2-part exhibition. I'm helping run Dolly Wiggler as backstage crew. I'm part of Wonder Briefs, which is a whole group of us who do the tiny puppet shows, and they're kind of before and after the main event, like commercials in a way, because they're short form, no more than 7 minutes or so puppet shows that we can perform in the corner of a room, under a stairwell, in a closet if there's space.
So it's like guerrilla puppeteering.
Yeah, because we just show up. We're there. We just need a space. But it gives people more. I really like it because it gives people more exposure to different forms of puppetry instead of the very almost intimidating be on a stage theater aspect of puppetry. So we're kind of more buskers without the tits because we get paid anyways. So I'm part of that. I'm not part of Anna Movies, but I still have something to do with it. But Anna Movies is happening at the Globe, I believe, on the 24th. And it is a selection of short animated films, nothing digital, all puppets or claymation, stuff like that, that was co-curated by 2 members of the Nakota AV Club, Cass Left Hand and Kelsey Two Youngman. So that's going on. There's a family group or a family parcel. There's a family portion, and then there's a second, like, more adult, kind of spooky portion. But there's so much going on. And then I'm here doing workshops to teach people how to do pop-up books as theater shows.
Nice.
Yeah.
Workshops that are coming up at Sparrow, what are coming up in the next couple of weeks that you guys are really looking forward to?
So I am going to be teaching, I think I have 4 more family workshops, so where parents and kids are coming to create things together. We're going to be doing a Muppet style, really it's glorified sock puppets, but we'll be building that in one of the workshops. Another workshop we're going to be, I'm using one of my books that I illustrated for Calgary Reads last year that it was published for the purpose of giving away. And so I'm going to be taking that book and creating a workshop out of it. So the book itself is celebrating stories, fairy tales, just the joy of reading and celebrating stories. So we're going to be making fairy tale rod style puppets with that. Another one called Robot Parade, which of course was influenced by Bolt's, my own book, where they're going to be making wooden, very simple marionettes, a rod marionette where you have it's not all strings, so you have like a stationary rod, but you have strings that can move the arms. And that was also influenced by that song, Robot Parade, Robot Parade. So these are the robots that the children made. And then I'm hoping that we can actually make a little video at the end of our Robot Parade.
Music video,
Yeah. And then a mask workshop that celebrates one of my newest books, The Zoo Inside Me, that I created with a friend of mine named Kelly Miller. And that's going to be mask style puppets like these. So this looks like it's just a mask to wear, but there's actually a rod behind it. So you can puppet the mask. And there's different ways that you can add fabric to add different body parts to it. But we're looking at making animals. And again, connecting story to it as well. And then Tia.
I have 2 more workshops to do. These 2 are based off the the pop-up books, because mostly when you go to learn how to make pop-up books, it's, as you think of them, as books, as cards, not really good for stages and performing outright on a flat surface. So no 90-degree angle lessons. So there's been a lot of problem solving, and I'd like to tell people about that. There's a beginner class where you learn the absolute basic shapes, and then the second class is a little bit more into measuring and geometry. So I have those. And then on the 22nd, there's one more additional workshop to do with the exhibition that I co-curated. The exhibition is about stop motion puppet animation. So again, nothing digital, but there's claymation, there's drawings, there's all sorts. So we have 2 of those artists coming in to teach a beginner stop motion workshop that you can go home and you can make things on your phone. So we try to keep it as accessible as possible. We want people to know that they can get started with just the stuff they have. So those are my 3.
Yeah, and we also have 2 other workshops that are going to be taught by Monica Illa. She is doing a shadow puppetry workshop and a miniature crankies workshop. So crankies is where you have your 2 rods and you crank it and the scene moves around. So she'll be teaching that, and that's through a partnership that we formed with the Festival of Animated Objects. So she'll be in this space teaching as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, cranky, like, is that
Like the scrolls move?
Like a scroll.
Oh,
yeah. So like you
yeah.
crank
So
and
if
the
you can
scroll moves
imagine
with it.
2 posts like this and like a scene that's on
Just wraps around.
and wraps
Yeah.
around,
Oh,
and then
okay,
you would
yeah.
crank it and that would go by. So
I've actually
I'm really
seen
looking
that
forward to
used
that
in a
one.
puppet show. One of the people that I mentioned, the suitcase people, he has an analog non-video game where he kind of cranks it, and then he gets the people who are watching to hold on to a controller, and it's like a Flappy Bird type of game. So he cranks it, and people do the puppeteering for him. There's another person actually in Wonder Briefs this year who she's using it to give people like a trip on a bike. She's got like a pedal thing that people do, and then she's going to turn it or something. I haven't seen it yet. But it leads you down the pathway as you bike. So it's a really good mechanism for scene changes that I've seen used in incredible ways.
Nice.
Man, just the mechanics of all this kind of blow me
I love
away.
mechanics
like, you have
so
to be
much.
so
Yeah,
inventive
I love
with it,
mechanics,
like-
yeah. I think that's one thing about puppetry that really appeals to me is I've always, even as a kid, I loved to figure out how things work, and I would take apart everything.
Yeah.
Music boxes, I want to figure this out, take it apart. Clocks, I never really figured out how to clock, but you know.
Yeah, no,
I
there's
saw
always a
pens,
sprocket left. and
Yeah.
you're like,
I'm sorry, clock.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
did good though.
Yeah.
My favorite teacher, or my favorite professor in university, he's passed now, but he always was super enthusiastic and keen, and he just liked to have fun too, and he was a huge inspiration to me now. But he always just looked at me and went, you need to move past the mechanism of this. Can you stop paying attention to the mechanism? And it's a hard part of puppetry to just continue past the mechanism once you've put half of it together. But the mechanisms are so neat all the time.
Yeah.
And that's not even talking about people who get into animatronic puppetry, like Jurassic Park and stuff. Those people are insane. It looks so cool, and I want to know it so bad. But till then, I have popsicle sticks and toothpicks.
Yeah. Well, even yesterday I ran a workshop for adults where we made tabletop puppets out of wood pieces. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, I love to allow avenues for them to go off on their own. So I had one person who stayed for about 2 hours after the official time. So she spent close to 5 hours working on this puppet, and she'd made a dragon. And we together, with the two of us plus her husband, we put so much time into figuring out how is this puppet going to, first of all, you have the mechanics of even just like, how is it going to move as you're holding it on rods? It seems so simple, but if there's certain movements that you want it to do, sometimes you got to add a string. And well, how is that string going to be rigged? And in this case, she also wanted it to breathe fire. So we really looked at like all the examples I had, and we found the mechanism that we thought would work. And then, okay, but this material isn't working, but this string isn't working. And you just, but it's the journey that we all crave as artists. That's the messy middle. That's what makes it like when you finally get to something that works. Like that's what brings us to this work as artists.
And one of the things I love about like the play and the mechanisms is the materials you end up using. So for me, a lot of the joints start out as popsicle sticks and toothpicks, because you get like, say you have a knee, so you have to have a brace, right? So you have to have like a kneecap. You still have a knob, and then you have like two pieces here, and then you put a stick through the middle, and that's a knee, and it works until it doesn't. So you got to figure something else out. And then you meet people like Kid Koala came to town with their Mosquitoville Storyville Mosquito Show, and they were nice enough to let everyone on stage afterwards to look at it, and they made these incredibly small, tiny, and incredibly durable puppets out of broken umbrella pieces. So now we're hoarding umbrellas, and then the importance of different kinds of springs. And as soon as you talk to anybody about glue, you are stuck there for 2 hours.
Let's talk about glue.
Let's talk about glue.
We love glue.
Everyone's got their preferred glue, and nobody likes hot glue. Nope, nobody likes hot glue.
Crazy glue.
Anybody who has made more than one puppet show tells you hot glue is your last resort.
Yeah, it is. It's a quick fix.
It's good for like.
It's not good for much.
No,
let's be honest.
But I'm also at the point
I
where
know.
like
sometimes you gotta get
the glue, man. And you got paper glues, you got construction glues, you got.
And then I always have to
cement.
think about like toxicity because I work with kids, so I'm like weld bond. I am like
with
spokesperson for weld
puppeteers,
bond.
then it's like the whole glue thing is like the shrimp thing with like Bubba and Forrest Gump.
Yep, probably. Yep.
All kinds of different glue.
There's she brought up Juanita Dawn earlier, and I went to visit her studio once too, and I was like, "What kind of glue do you use?" She's like, "I have a whole cabinet of glues. There's so many different glues." And like, as soon as someone comes to my house, I'm like, "Here's my glue trolley," because you have glues for every material.
Yeah.
You've got ones that expand, so you don't want to use them here. You've got glues that don't stick to that, but they stick to that. So glue is insane. Glue, man. It's a hell of a tool.
That's where the magic happens.
Well, because if you don't find the right glue, everything falls apart.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And that breaks the illusion.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing about puppetry is like we can make something that's really fun, but when we're thinking about sharing it with an audience, we want them to believe, just as we do, we want them to believe that object has life. And then when something breaks that illusion, it takes them out of that space. Like when we're in that and we're sharing that together and we're watching our puppets move, like we're invested. So even for an adult, for something to then break that story and break that investment, it's
traumatizing.
It's traumatizing. Even if you have a joint that all of a sudden, an elbow that let's say like suddenly moves back, what? like you suddenly become disconnected from the story that you're trying to tell.
But then you become very good at improv, which
like
is
how
where
you
we
work
have,
with your-
yeah. So like I mentioned with mine, the one knee for some reason, she's in her 50s, man. She's got bad knees, but she's also old enough to go to Woodstock 99. And when Fred Durst tells you to break stuff, he didn't mean your knee, but she tried. So when she gets knocked down in the family mosh pit, these are sentences I'm saying out loud, that she just goes, oh no, not the Woodstock 99 injury, or the boy whose arm keeps falling off. So she, when he gets hit, he goes, oh no, not my arm. Like, you become very good at improv to make it look like you intended for that to break, because you don't want to continue, you don't want to break that illusion, you don't want to let people know that, you know, you're panicking, you don't want people to know that this was unplanned, you just want them to keep having fun.
Right.
And not go to Woodstock 99.
Yeah.
I heard
But I
that
mean-
was a mess.
Yeah.
They did such a good documentary on it, and now everyone knows, and I feel like I can finally make jokes.
It's like the Millennial Fire Fest.
Oh, my brother's like 27 and he was telling me about it. He's like, oh, like, did you see it on TV when like, because he wasn't like, he was a little kid at the time, but he was so curious about it.
No, I was also a kid. I'm not 27, but I was also a kid. But just the bands I listened to, you know, you start finding stories from the 90s, and I mean, nobody pays attention to Woodstock 94, but Woodstock 99, that was, woof, worth a Netflix documentary, and a good one too. Which is also why I keep saying that mainly parents and older children get my shows, because toddlers don't know what Woodstock 99 is.
No.
So parents love it though.
Bringing up the documentary, I think that's a nice transition into into like movies and filmmaking, and how like what is there any like particular shows or TV shows or films that kind of have always stuck with you or inspired you as puppeteers?
That's a good question. I do love Jim Henson's work. I do love it, and I think there's just that magic that you, because it was made for children, there's a magic that you just bought into 100% as a child. You never questioned if Grover or Kermit were, you saw them as their own entities, right? You didn't even think about them as puppets. You're like, yeah, I want to meet them, man. I want to be with them, and that's the magic of puppetry across all disciplines, no matter what type of puppetry it is. It's believing in those characters and becoming invested in them. And we cannot deny I am actually a huge Jim Henson fan, and I think he's done so much to bring puppetry to everybody, and to a level where everybody can relate to those characters. So yes, I love Fraggle Rock, Sesame Street, The Muppet Show. All of those shows were just, I grew up in the 80s. I'm a bit older than Tia. I'm close to her mom's age.
That's okay. My mom's super young. Everyone feels bad. They're like, I could have a 30 or
doesn't
something
mean
child.
Doesn't mean she's little. But if it had, when I was younger, so that was like, like in the 80s, that was when Jim Henson was big, right? And anything that had a puppet, and I was into it. Mr. Dress Up, oh my, like Be Still My Heart. Like he brought this magical world, and even though Casey didn't even have a moving mouth, and for some reason Finnegan did but couldn't talk, like
we didn't notice that as kids.
But no, you didn't. And any time that they came on to the screen, even Mr. Rogers, like any time that these puppets came onto the screen, there's part of you that was like, oh, I can't wait to see what they're gonna say today. And you see them as their own characters. And I think too, like, I mean, I don't want to go too much on my doll thing, but
really
one thing, I'm really into them, but as a kid, I loved imagining, and this was before Toy Story came out. Okay, Toy Story came out in like the 90s, and so this was not way before, but this was before Toy Story. I believed, I knew it wasn't true, but you believed. Anyway, there's this little thin line between.
I used to think that so much as a kid. I'd try to catch them. Like.
Yes, and you'd like close the door slowly,
Yeah.
Or just sit there and like stare at them and say, are you going to come alive today? I want, like, you just want that. But those shows that use puppets, that's what they did.
Yeah.
They, like, we wanted that to happen so badly. And kids are natural puppeteers as they play with their action figures, as they play with their dolls or their stuffed animals. They're animating them. We're natural puppeteers. And yeah, so to see shows like that growing up, and especially the work of Jim Henson, I think, really, how could it not influence you?
Yeah, I mean, personally, like I'm a huge fan of Jim Henson too. To this day, still influences my filmmaking. We are actually making a short right now, which is a sci-fi comedy musical that incorporates a giant life-size Muppet. So,
And it's going to be submitted to Movies, right? Because we need to
Eventually.
show this to people.
yeah,
Sci-fi music, something sounds great.
yeah, but it's like I've always just loved the aspect of how that helps to tell stories, is that you have that. And I mean, you're right, like the 80s were the heyday
Yeah.
for that, even from like kid shows. Like I think one of my favorite kid shows was Today's Special.
Yes.
For anybody under the age of 35, they won't know what that is.
Well,
but
weren't they mannequins that came to life?
there was a mannequin that came to life, but there was also
Not
a
Kim
mouse.
Cattrall, but
The security guard.
And the security guard
Yeah.
was a puppet as well. But yeah, the one thing I remember from the 80s is that like we look at them as kids movies, but there's two in particular that traumatized me a bit as a child.
But they stay with you.
But they stayed with me and they kind of geared me towards like, I'm like, this is how you should do it. And one of them was The Never-Ending Story.
Yeah.
Which I thought the puppeteering in that was fantastic. But and even looking at the story right now, is it really a kid's story? I
Right,
don't know.
right.
I mean, we all remember what happened to the horse, but
Don't do that. don't bring that up. We were having a fun time.
yeah, and then and then I mentioned a kids movie with a dying horse.
Okay, everything dies, even flies.
Even flies, exactly.
But see, never-ending story is why stories have to have death in them for me, I guess. We
Yeah.
just connected that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Unlocked a memory.
There you go.
Yeah, and then the second movie that is still one of my absolute favorites, I would still put it in like my top 10 films, would have to be The Dark Crystal,
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
which, I mean, I saw it in the 90s on VHS, and I think I was like 7 the first time I watched it, because it's Jim Henson. I'm like, yay!
Yay, yeah.
And then, yeah, I couldn't turn the lights off in my room for about 6 months after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just thought that, like, the older I get, the more I appreciate those films, because, like, just the detail and the amount of effort that was put into that.
Yeah.
And from a storytelling perspective, it's one of, like, the most amazingly unique stories,
Yeah.
I think, that's ever been put on film.
Yeah.
So,
I grew up in a house with a lot of kids. Mom had 4, but there was always 6 at our house for some reason.
oh, you were that house.
We were that
Where
house.
the neighborhood kids go?
Yeah. I mean, there was 4 streets in my town. It wasn't hard to pick one. But with all the kids in the house all the time, it was always kids' movies, even through high school. So people are like, you don't know Friends? I'm like, no, we didn't watch that. We had Blue's Clues playing at that hour or something. Which I'm not mad that I don't know anything about Friends.
No,
Just going
you're
to
not
say that as an
missing-
adult. But between having kids around all the time and kids' movies on, we had one TV, we were in the middle of nowhere, no satellite or anything. So Mom's like, here's a wide VHS collection. So between kids' movies and, as Jenny brought up, my mom is particularly youthful. She also kind of grew up in the 80s. And her favorite movie was The Dark Crystal. So when you said that, I was like, that's what I grew up on. But I also really connected with Labyrinth. I really liked, especially the little worm in the wall. Loved the little worm in the wall. And I got really into puppets that way. We didn't really do Sesame Street. Don't know why that just skipped. I really loved Animal as a kid, and I wanted to play drums, but I guess I was just cool. I don't know. I didn't really pay attention to the rest of them. Yeah, I think Blue's Clues took over more than Sesame Street. But animal, I had everything animal if I could find it. And then with my mom's like 80s influences, I knew about Fraggle Rock even though I didn't know what it was. I just knew it was Muppets. And then for some reason I knew about HR Puff and Stuff. I think that's its name, but that's like a 60s, 70s show.
I think that's, early 70s.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I knew about it. I don't know why I shouldn't. That was weird. I still watch it now because it's on the internet, but that's a wild one. I guess if it was weird and for some reason a middle of nowhere antique store had it, I had it. But between Labyrinth and then like later on Jim Henson, the company did a more like digital puppetry one where they have Mirror Mask. Loved Mirror Mask so much.
That's the one that like had a sphinx in it or something?
Yeah, so it was, the actress was live action and then there was this weird, highly green screened everything with, I can only explain it as digital puppets because you'd have like masks. It was very much a mask movie where like you had a cat looking thing, but it had a mask that the face was out of order, and she grew up in a circus, so that's also why everything was weird. Living in the middle of nowhere, you're just like what you get. But
it was a very surreal movie.
it was fantastic, and that explains a lot. But yeah, you brought up Toy Story, and I just, I had so much like scorn for Toy Story for so long, because as a kid I wanted to make, like I'd watch special features at the end of the VHS, I'd sit through the credits to watch how they made Sleeping Beauty, and they did like the background painting on glass, and like they would show you all those details. Then Toy Story came out, and nobody did that anymore. So like until I was older, I was like, Toy Story, Toy Story. And now I make puppets, so I do what I want anyways. But yeah, my mom had a huge cultural influence on me growing up in the 80s. Mirror Mask, Jim Henson, but older kid Jim Henson.
My mom actually had a huge influence when I was younger. She would make me and my brother watch what she grew up watching. So me and my brother were the only kids on the block that knew Thunderbirds and Stingrays and all that other stuff. And it's like, we tried to explain it to our friends. And they were like, what are you talking about? And then when it became popular again, it's like me and my brother were like, yay! But
I also have, when you have a young mother, hopefully you also have a young father and not an older father. So my dad also grew up in the 80s, and he had like Alf dolls and stuff.
Oh yeah.
So I love the Alf dolls. I know what the California raisins are.
Yes,
I know what
they were
noids
great.
are. Like all these little things, for some reason, ended up as puppets when they were sold as toys. So I also know what Thunderbirds are.
Yeah.
I really love Team America World Police way too much because of how much my dad loved like Thunderbirds and that kind of stuff. So yeah, no, I get those references too.
Yeah. No,
Well, it was just interesting, just talking about Mr. Rogers and Mr. Dress Up, like, those were my big things when I was a kid, and it's interesting just the suspension of disbelief when you're a kid,
Yeah.
you know, rewatching the Mr. Rogers doc, you know, he has the puppet,
Yeah.
and it's, you know, it's very simple, and you can see his lips moving, but
Yeah.
the kid is buying it as the puppet still.
Yes.
That's a lot of technique though.
Yeah, and and I was totally that way as a kid too. You buy it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, and it was so comforting. And recently I watched the Mr. Dress Up doc on Prime, and I think it was Juliet Lawrence. She was the puppeteer for like something crazy, like 30 years.
Yeah.
And Casey and Finnegan. Wait, which one was the human?
Casey.
Casey.
Yeah.
And I think she deliberately made Casey non-binary.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
everyone was like, is it a boy? Is it a girl?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The answer is
But
yes.
the
answer
wonderful
is
thing
yes.
is, like, as a child, for me, Casey was a girl. For my dad, Casey was a boy.
Yeah.
And we were both right, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I'm still relatively new to puppeteering. It's only been like 2.5 years, but a lot of what you're saying, like as a kid, you notice the lips are moving, but you still pay attention to the puppet. It's very slight techniques. Like when you're performing, you look at the puppet so that people are looking at what you're looking at. Or when you come out with the puppet, you don't show people you're putting it on your hand. Like you go behind a curtain and come out with the puppet so that the puppet comes as itself. There's a lot of consideration into how people perform.
That's a good point, like not showing you're putting it on, because I think, Mr. Rogers was visiting like children in the hospital and he'd kind of like bring it up on the side of the bed and just very cute.
Yeah, it's harder to create a suspension of belief when you can see that that's a sock on a man's hand. So, yeah.
So when it comes to puppetry and your art, is there any other art forms other than, say, music or writing that you kind of use as almost like a muse or something that inspires you to keep trying different things?
I think my work illustrating and painting is always coming into my work in puppetry. Some of my puppets that I'm making right now are inspired by books that I've written in the past. Like I mentioned how I created bolts as I was writing that book. Well, when I created this little guy here, he was actually meant to be the boy character that's in that story as well. The other thing is when I'm thinking about creating characters through illustration, you're thinking about how different shapes inform the personality of that character. So for example, like our circular shapes, you're thinking warm and caring and approachable. Joyful, square shapes, you're thinking things that are more stubborn, can't be moved. Things with points, like triangular shapes, tend to lend themselves to villains because we think of sharp and things that can hurt them. So these rules that you have, or these understandings that we have about visual language in terms of illustration, bringing that into puppetry or having that inspire new characters within puppetry, there's such a strong connection. And even when we were doing the mask workshop with the Wonderheads, the different masks that you would choose, they had, even though these masks that we were choosing at one point had neutral expressions, however, you could see the shape of the head, just a general square shape, and all of a sudden that would inform the character that you could become with that mask. So I think that I'm finding crossovers all the time, and it's really neat to see how things can be so connected. How you don't just abandon, there's no abandoning this, oh now I'm doing puppetry, so I'm no longer a book illustrator. No, actually, this is just an expansion and a way to grow as an artist, and everything kind of comes along and everything influences each other continuously. Yeah.
I love cartoons more than most adults. It's kind of just what I watch. Like I even have some friends from like high school, and they'll be like, "How did you know about that? You don't have kids." I'm like, "Okay, but I am one, so yes." But between all the insanity of illustration and cartoons, because I'll sit there and I'll watch Naruto on repeat because it's all the same story all the way through, and 80% of it's filler. But then I really love like Super Jail and stuff from like Adult Swim that people should not watch, because it's just like that ultra violence kind of era of animation where everything is so chaotic and detailed all the time. So cartoons are always a huge inspiration just to think, because there's the fluidity that you kind of talk about in your illustrations, but people get that in their cartoons as well. Right. My partner's actually watching all of Pokemon right now, and the Alola season is terrible because it just keeps going, and they made it more American because it's based in Hawaii. But they've over-exaggerated so much of the proportions, and the character design's all different, and I hate it, but it's got to be watched just so we can get it. But you learn so much about how things can move by how other people have made them move, because like we learned in like our mask thing, it informs a lot of how performance happens, how movement happens. Like there's certain tricks for animators where if you film yourself doing the thing and then animate it, that's how you get the references, right? So watching cartoons and how they move in their weird ways can inform my puppet moving. But I also take a lot of influence from toys. My house is Transformers and Lego, and sort of it's crap, I find. I really like WWE plushies, and we both collect a lot of Lego, and he's got his entire collection of Transformers still, so there's a lot in how the toys are made. Like even when I'm like troubleshooting how a character can be built, I'll use Technic bits to get the joints. Earlier versions of the one puppet, her neck is a ball and socket joint that are Technic pieces until the glue I had made it stretch weird and it broke. But you also get a lot of the reflection of what Jenny was talking about in illustration, how certain characters, they're bad because they're spiky. Or you know, like the Lego characters are bad because they have certain colors or stuff like that. And all these same themes of design are carried through so many aspects that look at toys a lot.
Well, on toys, have you guys ever tried like stop motion at all?
Yes.
And what was your experience with that?
Yes. Yes. My experience is the lack of patience I have is astounding. Like I've watched documentaries from Aardman Animation who does Flushed Away and Wallace and Gromit and stuff, which those were also big influences as a kid. And they're like anybody who gets into stop motion animation hates themselves. Or even I've watched with digital puppetry, you'll get people from Pixar who are the actual animators, and they're like, nope, been working here 23 years, I've animated 7 minutes of film, which I understand because I also was getting into digital animation for a bit, and I like puppetry because it lacks the tedium of animation.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Which I think, I mentioned to you before with my other puppet show, I was really impressed that I was able to draw it because I have a lot of hand issues, a lot of movement issues. So one thing I've learned with a lot of puppets is it's really accessible, a lot more accessible than animation, right? I can't always push a button, I can't always hold a pencil, but there's so many different ways to make handles, so many ways to attach things to the fingers that do move that day that I can animate an object.
And so back when I was doing my undergrad and all of these computer graphic programs were fairly new. So when I learned Photoshop, it was really early Photoshop, early Illustrator. And I also learned Cinema 4D. I don't even know if it's still around, but that was the early 3D animation. They called it Cinema, or did they call it Cinema 4D? Anyway, it was along the, it was right when, Toy Story first premiered and we made these. And I really enjoyed it, but at the same time, what doesn't pull me back to that is the idea that things are only existing on a screen. I think stop motion kind of breaks that too, because you have something that is physically being manipulated, which I think is really cool. And knowing that it physically exists somewhere. But I think when you get into that sort of, for me anyway, what I love about puppetry is that there is something physical that exists, that you are, you're working with gravity, or or against gravity, as the case might be, and you're moving something, and that something actually has a place in this world, that's not just flashing on a screen. Which isn't to say that there is so much, I do respect that art form very, very much. That's not to say that I hope that doesn't come across as I'm saying, oh, that's not, because I do respect it a lot. And I do use a lot of digital tools when I'm illustrating books as well. When I illustrate books, I always try to do something physical, at least first. So sometimes I go straight from beginning to end, it's all physical, and all I've done is scan those images, and there's no digital editing whatsoever. But other times I'll create a base out of like paint and texture and collage, and then I'll layer digital illustration on top. But I just love the idea that something physically exists in this world.
Yeah. With the current exhibition that we co-curated, with all the stop motion animators, a lot of them you find started out as painters, started out as illustrators, and then they didn't feel like it was enough. Like for me personally, I also was in painting, and the pictures were cool, made some neat stuff, but it didn't feel like enough. I generally lose interest if I walk into a room with flat things on the walls because it's more walls. So a lot of stop motion animators, sculptors in general, they're looking for that tactile nature in things. So I do want to make myself do stop motion in some capacity, or that kind of animation where it's like Robot Chicken, but not, where it's more active. There's like an actual term based on the TV show from the early 90s that I cannot recall at the moment when it needs to be recalled. But yeah, it kind of just stems from you start as a drawer or painter and you find you need more, which these bring the images to life, as you keep saying.
I think you're touching on what I think is our need to connect to story. We all need to connect to story. And paintings we know that there's a story, but it's so easy to walk by that story and give it a 3-second glance in a gallery and not really, sit back. Boy, we appreciate the people that do take more than 3 seconds. Thank you. But at the same time, like when you have these moving objects, even if the story is so simple, it's something that like makes us pause and makes us wonder and slows us down and draws us in, and there's magic there.
Right. It makes me think of your aha moment when you're talking about first getting into puppeteering, because anyone who draws something or paints anything, in your mind you're kind of picture it like it moving. And then the fact that like you've done so many illustrations before and you probably thought about that, and now all of a sudden you're like, oh, holy crap, like this can actually move, like everything I've been envisioning.
I had that with pop-up books, because all of my how now brown cow, now all of my puppet shows have pop-up books because I'm able to still illustrate them and draw and color, but they're 3D, they're popping out, they're dimensional, they're able to be involved in something. So that's even one step away.
When I was working with Puppet Stuff Canada, to go off on that, both Brendan and Reese said to me, there isn't a single puppeteer out there who would say, yep, I only do puppets. I think that probably every puppeteer out there is a multidisciplinary artist.
You have to be.
So yeah, because you're performing, possibly you're singing, possibly there's music in there. Dance, there's a huge connection to dance. And illustrating too, and then you also think there's set design, there's sculpture, there's so many elements that come together.
Like costume design, I had to make a tearaway dress because we needed to show the surprise
and fiber arts and and I think maybe that's what draws us as artists into that art form is that, as we mentioned before, the expansive nature of it. We want to grow. Our souls want to grow. We want to know that we're moving forward and that we're our roots are going deeper and deeper. We're not withering. We're not staying at any surfaces. And man, can you dig into puppetry? You can just dig right in.
I love that you brought up dancers, because we have two specifically. Like I work with Jocelyn Ma in Chaos. She's quite a well-accomplished dancer. In Calgary, and then she also toured around Europe and did her master's in she's impressive. I'm intimidated all the time.
Oh yeah, she's amazing.
But between her and Kaya Irwin, who is a company dancer with DJD, so decidedly jazz, they tend to gravitate more towards the mask performance part, and I love watching them for the way they bring movement to these objects and these masks. Like they do touch on the puppets as well. Jocelyn tends to perform with Juanita Dawn, but they do movements in a way that we wouldn't have thought. So with their puppetry, their mask stuff is so good. Kaya has a new one where she did like Night at the Roxbury, but she has a mask that for some reason looks like Chris Kattan, and then her upper body is like black, like she's got like a morph suit, and then the mask is here, and she's just doing this, so that it's got like the What Is Love dance scene, and it's like, man, only a dancer would think of that, right?
It's so good.
Like the rest of us don't like moving with our body, but they come in, and Jocelyn does this incredibly fluid like dance thing about discovering an object as a masked creature, and they do incredible things as dancers within this puppet and mask community. It really brings in everybody.
Yeah, and I remember Jocelyn speaking about her work as a puppeteer with Juanita Dawn, and she was saying like, she said it is so connected because you're always thinking in terms of when you're moving a puppet, you're expressing emotion sometimes without words. Like there's so many wordless puppet shows out there. So how do we bring that into the body of the puppet and into its movements and into these like even little subtle movements? And a dancer understands that.
Yeah.
And so she just channels that energy. Instead of it being in her body, she's able to then channel it into that puppet.
There's actually in Japan, one of the traditional forms of puppeteering, you have to be like, you have to, for 10 years, you have to be the guy who moves the feet. So and you have to move the feet, and then there's the people who move the hands, and then there's the master moves the head. So that has all the like noticeable emotion, but you get the people with the feet, they have to learn how to smile with feet. So they have like 10 years where they have to learn how to move things specifically before they can move up to like the next like body form of the puppet. And it's so involved.
Right.
So dancers, all the same.
I kind of wanted to touch a little bit on what just kind of popped in my head was, as puppeteers, like my mind always goes to like you're either behind a screen or you don't see the actual manipulator. But we're actually talking about a lot of stuff right now where you have the subject, but you also have the performer with it. Is that something that you guys also partake in? And which is kind of like simpler for you guys, do you find that's easier to do, to interact with the audience and the puppet, or to just put a sock on and go behind a curtain?
So personally, I love like roving puppeteering is where you're going with your puppet and you are interacting with people and having conversations with your puppet. And I love doing it. I love it. I didn't know I would love it until I actually tried it. And I became a roving puppeteer with Puppet Stuff Canada. And it's interesting, like I am visible when I work with Puppet Stuff Canada, I'm visible. But one of their rules for the characters that I play a character called Pecky Becky. She's fabulous. She's so different from me. She can talk to anybody, and she doesn't mind. And when I'm Pecky Becky, even though I'm physically there, I'm not there. So a kid might say, "Oh, you're a puppet," and Pecky Becky would go, "Puppet? What's a puppet? Have you ever heard of a puppet? What is that?"
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and I love that. I love that sort of suspension. But it's so fascinating how many people will come up and just engage with you. It's this wonderful point of contact that it's just fulfilling and unexpected. Like we were doing a show for Canada Day this summer, and Pecky Becky and I were, what was really Pecky Becky, I was just witness, but Pecky Becky was flying back to the break place, back to her nest, as we would say, and this group of, I'd say they were like teenagers or young adults, and I think they were part of a dance troupe or something. And they saw Pecky Becky flying, and they all gathered like a circle around me. And there was like 20 some of them. Like
That's
there was a huge.
That many teenagers?
No, man. But that's the thing. Normally, those teenagers, would they give Jenny the time of day?
No.
Like they would, like, look at that old lady. Nope. Becky, they were hanging there waiting for Becky to say something. Like, Becky, tell us something. And, hi, oh, she talked, amazing.
But I think that's one of the great things about that is like, yeah, if you were in a park and you were just there with a puppet, like everybody from all age group would just go over there.
Yes.
Well, that's
we
most
all
of our
love-
gigs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just something amazing about that. And
It's so special. Yeah, like, oh, look at that puppet. And I just love becoming Becky. I love becoming her because she just, it's hard to explain. I am sure all puppeteers feel this, but you feel like it's not you out there. And I'm sure actors feel that too, but it's like, it wasn't me. I wasn't there. Jenny doesn't say that to people. Jenny's not outgoing. Jenny's the sort of introverted type that just kind of sometimes fades to the background. Becky is not. Becky goes up to people in the park and says, I love your cotton candy because it looks exactly like my hair or my feathers,
It's like a character almost. It's almost like when you have people that do performances in masks. The moment you put that mask on, you're not really you anymore.
Yeah, your whole body has to
Yeah.
have the physicality of the character.
Yeah, but it's almost like you're channeling. I don't have another word for it other than channeling because it just feels like, especially with roving, you don't have a script either.
Right.
Like roving, you have an idea of who this character is, but you don't have a script. You have ideas about what you want, who you want this character to be, but you just kind of let that take over, and it's a cool experience. I love it.
So it ties into that improv kind of stand-up comedian.
And it ties into clowning too. Clowns do that too, right?
A lot of physical theater.
Yeah.
It can also be a different shade of your personality too.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing in the Mr. Rogers doc where his kids were saying, just at the dinner table, like he would speak in the King Friday voice if he was a little displeased. Like he would never actually be mad himself. He would use the puppet voices.
I'm not
as
mad.
A vehicle.
The king is mad.
Yeah, the king is mad. Yeah.
That's worse than I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Yeah.
Because I'm not even me right now. That's how mad I am. So that's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. And then anytime I perform with Yolok here, it's different than with Becky because with Yolok I still exist. And I don't want to call it ventriloquism because there's no attempt at not moving my mouth. But Yolok exists, and I'm Yolok's Auntie Jenny, and Yolok is sweet and kind and curious, and he's a gentle soul, aren't you, Guy?
I was waiting for him to talk back.
I know. I know. Hey, buddy.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things I kind of wanted to bring up too is me being a filmmaker. I love it when I see puppeteering and stuff on film. I'm just wondering if there's anything recently you saw that you kind of liked that, or something that's relatively recent that is hopeful that we can see more of this art form on screen.
I think in Blue-Eyed Samurai, the Netflix anime that came out, there's the 10th episode has a whole shadow puppet storytelling line. So well done. Not only is the whole show so well done, because I saw a bunch of the back like the producers and stuff, they were like putting up their sketches and showing all the research they did, like even into like the way the certain designs were done on the kimonos and stuff. But I got so excited when I saw that the shadow puppets in there, because it was such a good addition, right? When you introduce a different media or format to something you've been watching for 10 episodes already, it can be hard to figure out if it's going to add or subtract from it, and if you're just pushing it in there because you want to. But it worked so well because they cut it in with like they cut it in with like a little bit of backstory, and like they kind of segmented it, and it was very well done. And it's fairly new. I think it came out this year.
Nice.
So.
Yeah, there's one I wanted to kind of mention. I saw on the festival circuit last year, and it was one of the best shorts I've seen in a long, long time. It's called Old Man Dragon.
It's in our festival this year. You can see it at the Globe on the 24th.
There you go. Yeah, I saw it in Edmonton. I saw it at SIF last year. It was remarkable. And I'm like, as a guy who makes short films, I'm like, I wish I could make that.
You can. You just got to keep trying.
Yeah. So,
gotta
but yeah,
practice
I wanted to give that film a shout out because I thought it was one of the best local shorts that I saw.
I'm really excited for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you guys seen it?
I've seen most of it just because I have I have all the files because I do a lot of like the background producing, organizing, administrative stuff, and I put a lot of the information on our website. So yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. But there's so many pretty good ones. It's really, especially after COVID, a lot of people were like, wow, I have time to do things now. So a couple of our people in our exhibition, they started stop motion because they had time. And there's just some really good work coming out of an unfortunate time where people learned how to bake and they watched a lot of TV, and some of them learned how to make new skills.
And as parents just suffered because it was hard.
I just played a lot of Animal Crossing.
Yeah,
I'm getting a
free
nod
time.
about Animal Crossing from the camera crew. That's pretty good.
So on, just in general with, I've learned a lot, especially talking to you guys, and especially over doing research over the past week or whatever. Calgary has a very big
Yes.
puppeteering community.
Yes.
It's larger than I thought it could be.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that is beneficial that you guys see from having such a large community here?
So much variety.
Yeah.
Like you've said you've worked with puppet stuff. Juanita, you've worked with WP puppets.
Yep.
Everybody has their own thing.
Yeah.
And you learn so much and you see so much all the time, and everyone has really good input. And because everyone does so much, we're all super encouraging of each other as well, because it's just a really positive, oh my God, you did that for real on stage kind of attitude.
Yeah.
There's a mother who was in the Dolly Wiggler a while ago, did a very rather inappropriate 3-minute performance. And last year their child was like, all right, gotta one-up mom. And we loved it because it was funny. And you just keep seeing all these wild and wacky people, and they come back to town specifically for this. So,
Yeah. And I think that the other wonderful thing is that, like you said, everybody does feel like a community and supports each other. WP Puppet, they do run their own festival, but they're always inviting other puppeteers to be part of that. And then Festival of Animated Objects, of course, everybody is finding ways to be part of that and inviting to be part of that. So as you start to dig into one form of puppetry, you suddenly, or what one person is doing, you suddenly realize that they do have the support and the connection of all of these other people in the community. And at the same time, it's so different.
Yeah.
They're all doing things that are so different, but we all feel this camaraderie as well, which is just amazing. Really cool. Yeah.
it's the most inclusive, supportive community I've ever been in. And a lot of us focus so much on accessibility too. I have workshops on how to make stuff out of stuff you already have. Like I said, most of my stuff is popsicle sticks and toothpicks, because until I could get the tools, right, you just make things. And yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
What is it about Calgary that you guys think that draws so many people towards puppeteering here?
I'm struck by one thing that Christine Cook said, and she says one thing that puppetry takes is a lot of grit and determination, and sort of the ability to say, man, that's hard, but I want to figure it out. You want to figure it out. And I think there is an attitude like that in Calgary, there always has been, about like going a little bit against the grain. There's an entrepreneurial spirit here in Calgary, and I think that carries over to puppetry as well. Because you are figuring a lot of things out for yourself, and you are taking risks. And this is a great city to take risks in.
Especially the last few years. Like when I first moved here in like 2014, I did not see a place for me here. I was like, I don't paint landscapes and horses, so I guess I'm gonna stop doing things, because I couldn't find anywhere, right? Like it's been kind of weird, but there's been a push, especially the last, like just before COVID till now, maybe 5 or so years, where everything's just so much more readily available. There's so much more art. We're trying to push more for like more inclusive activities for everyone to find it. It's just a lot of good things all at once, just coming together.
Great. So what other types of glue can you use with puppets?
Every kind of glue, depending on what you're building. Because like I had to put.
But what about like staples? Is that just like
Oh, but then if you think it's like staple, well, I mean,
I don't know, like
I think you'd have to be
sewing.
careful.
Wouldn't you sew?
Oh, I sew
yeah,
so
you
much
sew
stuff.
so much.
So I was showing you some trees I made earlier, right? The spray painted, creepy looking trees. I started out with like a 3-strand rope, and I unraveled that so that there was 3 strands, and then I put a wire through it, and then it kind of gave it this bumpy texture along, and then it frayed at the end, so I just burnt the end so it melted and looked cooler. And then I ended up sewing a few of those like string wire rods together and then bent the shape. And then I took some cane that you'd use to like make a chair, and I kind of stripped that because it's really flexible, bendable wood. And then I glued that on mostly with like construction glue, because that stuff does not, that's for like wood, stays. So I use that. I hate using it though, because you have to use like a caulking gun, and it's really hard to use, and it's kind of unpredictable, and if it'll ever come out of the tube. And then spray painted it, but then I'd use like hot glue for like attaching toys to things. So there's tiny skulls in some of the trees. I'd hot glue that in there. But yeah, I sew things, I staple things. Sometimes if it's glue, just tape, that works. There's been times when like I've soldered tiny bits of wire because I can't get glue, or like the glue won't stick to the metal, or the tape can't get in there, so I'll wrap a tiny little really fine wire, and then I'll just put some solder on there so that it melts together, and then you have another joint because the knee keeps falling off. So it's very, do your best.
I would think with like, especially like fabric puppets, like, I don't know, my brain went to carpet tape.
So for the like a foam constructed, I'm kicking myself for not knowing the exact name of that type of glue. It is toxic. You have to use a gas mask when you're using it, but it will, when you do a foam construction, which goes underneath your foam and fabric, like a Muppet style puppet, this adhesive will, it kind of actually eats into the foam a little bit, and then there's like a light, you do this really light dusting of it, and then the edges can then squeeze together. And I am just racking my brain trying, I don't know why that name has escaped me right now, but that is a big adhesive that's used in foam construction. Personally, because I have kids in my home, I work in a studio in my home, I work around children, I go into schools, toxicity is a huge issue for me. So when I constructed Yolok, instead of using pieces of foam that came together and had to be glued together for his frame, I actually took a block of upholstery foam and actually carved it out as if sculpting it. So carved the outside, carved in it, and then layered my fabric on top and did a lot of sewing for him. Because I'm always, I love to learn the way the professionals do, like Puppet Stuff Canada. They taught me how to do that foam construction and how to use that adhesive that is slipping my mind right now, but how to use that and how it actually goes together by the pros. But I'm always looking for alternatives because kids.
Yeah.
And working in the home too. Like I use contact cement, which is very liquid, and it's also very good and sticks to everything. But because it's so liquid, it doesn't have a lot of, it's not very thick. So it's very good for attaching like fabric to things. It's very good for attaching like hair, because you can like kind of brush it on in layers. So I make a lot of wigs with that. And you can make wigs out of yarn. You just brush it out and hey, you've got fiber. But yeah, there's so much. And then even the way puppets are constructed, like Jenny's talked about foam puppets, I use whatever garbage is in my drawer. Juanita John tends to sculpt hers in clay and then cast it with plastic-slip, and it gives it this really nice, thin, like very light but sturdy plastic kind of thing. A lot of people use wood because it's so sturdy and there's a lot of tradition behind it. But yeah, I mean, you go to any hardware store, you go to any art store, you see an aisle of glue. So,
But what you mentioned about staples, like one thing that we always have to think about as is how you are holding the puppet and how you're interacting with it. So if you have anything sharp, if you could imagine being in the middle of a performance, reaching for your puppet and then getting scratched across the hand, but the show must go on. We have to think about like, how is it being held? How can it be held for potentially quite a while while you're doing this? So while there might be places for things like staples, that's definitely something to consider. Is like if it's something like a glove puppet or a Muppet style puppet where your hand has to slide in there and it has to be there for a while. If anything's going to come and start to jab there, like you're going to have this thing jabbing into your hand as long as that performance goes on. So we always have to consider the functionality of it, right?
like we use staples in our workshops that we do with the public, where we have a mask making workshop. We pretty much give them a mask, a paper mask, they color it in, and then we kind of staple it shut. But we make sure that the flat side is where the skin would be, so that the like sharp closed end would be outside. That way people don't put it on their face and get scratches, right? But yeah, then like Jenny mentioned, when you put your hand in something, you don't want like sharp plastic. You don't want exposed Velcro. Like you don't want the hook part of the Velcro. Because you don't know how long you're going to be performing in there. And not only does it get sweaty sometimes in masks and puppets, but it gets itchy. So, yeah. Staples are very good for certain scenery, though.
Right. So we kind of touched on too, that I want to go back to, is that you kind of use a bunch of different items when constructing things. Do you know off the bat, like when you're doing another thing, what you're going to construct it out of? Because I was going to ask you about that, like, because you were mentioning some things that clearly sounded a lot more pricey than simply just constructing something out of whatever you had. So when it comes to that, like, how do you determine what you would use when you're coming up with an idea for something? Or is it just spur of the moment?
Problem solving, I think.
I mean, there's people like Juanita Dawn, right? We bring her up a lot because she's so good at what she does, and she does a lot of like projects for the government. Like she reconstructed a whole bunch of puppets for Parks Canada recently. I think in the last year. She might still be doing it, but like sculpting it with big blocks of clay and then like casting it and getting all the equipment for casting, that's obviously going to be something that you get over time, right? So you start out with paper, probably. You start out with the dollar store, which I love the dollar store. You cannot take that from me. I wish I didn't love the dollar store, but when I need a pack of popsicle sticks and they come in 5 different sizes, I'm going to the dollar store. And like when you're first starting out and you're problem solving, like Jenny said, you start out, I keep bringing up popsicle sticks and toothpicks because you don't have someone who can fabricate the metal, right? You don't have someone who can, I mean, I don't have 3D printing, right? So I don't have a way to form these shapes. And then as you go on, you can realize you need a scroll saw. You would really probably benefit from a sander, but there's ways to start out.
I think,
quite cheap.
Yeah, and I think too, it all depends on the story that you're trying to tell and the type of puppet that is going to tell that story the best. So, when I constructed Yolok is really, I mean, that was really kind of inspired by my niece, who I wanted to have a puppet that would interact with her. And so Yolok is a true existing person and there's something soft and wonderful about that foam and fabric construction that really appeals to younger kids. It's huggable, it's lovable, which is different than my wooden puppets, although they do have a certain charm to them as well. But I would use a wooden puppet. It has also this sort of, I guess, I would say it's more traditional, but the wooden puppets also have this sort of, so there's a link to tradition in that, but there's also this sort of level of sculpture and artistry that kind of comes across when you see that, because, you know, like these hands, don't get me started about how hard it is to actually hand carve hands and feet, and even the joints are all wood constructed. So what am I trying to convey with the puppet that's been traditionally constructed, with all of these joints and the wood? I want a certain level of artistry in that. And then when we get to puppets that are like more like found objects that have been like put together by a junk table, like this is a silly, goofy guy, and his story is going to be much different than the soulful story that Milton might tell, or the loving, careful, joyful interactions that Yolok might have. So, which isn't to say that like you can't. We want people to start everywhere. You know, like we want them to start with anything that they have on the hand. And like I've mentioned before, found object assemblage and those sculptures that I was making from all these found objects is what brought me into puppetry. Right. But that even making the decision to use old objects that you find, like antique pieces that come together, that tells a story too. Mm-hmm. That's a story of layers of who owned this before, and it really brings a sort of element of time, an element of ownership and story and history into that puppet. So that puppet isn't like this, a shiny new sort of entity on its own. Bolt's over there, he was several lamps, car parts, clock pieces, all these different pieces coming together to make him. And just like the story that he represents, it's all about the passage of time, right, and the way that we change through our lives. So there's symbolism in that, and a level of artistry there.
Something I try to do with materials as well. So with my first puppet show, I made the main character, the fly, out of fabric. I wanted him to be more dimensional. I wanted him to be more of a thing. And then, like, it mentions a snail mail, or a male, I can't say it right anymore, but a male, like a mailman. So I made a snail mail, male snail, but he's also a male who is a snail. But I made him, I made the nosy neighbors, I made the IRS. They're just flashes across, right? So I made them, they're a drawing on a stick. They're not as important, but they're still characters. So the importance of the character to the story can also decide like what materials you use. The frog, I wouldn't make him out of like a drawing on a stick, even though he's also just a punchline, because he has quite a lot of more importance, right? So there's so many things that go into everything. And then you change it 5 more times. And then you change it again once you learn something new. So.
Yeah, I found it so fascinating hearing all about puppeteering and just everything that goes into it. And it makes me think of music almost like, no disrespect to 2D animation, but it makes me think of music as in, like, no matter if you get this fancy synthesizer or a sampler, nothing is going to replace a regular piano or guitar.
Yes.
And that's how puppeteering seems like. All the power to you in 2D animation, and it almost seems like there's maybe a resurgence. Fraggle Rock has come around, and there's a big community here that's blossoming. I guess, do you see like the future just opening up for puppeteering again?
Absolutely. I think we want to connect to something real. And it's interesting, that made me, your comments made me think of AI, for example. And as an illustrator, a book illustrator, AI is something that is
It's an uphill
invading
battle.
it's invading this thing that should be this beautiful art form and this beautiful expression of story and our soul and our heart, and prompts are being fed into a computer and this thing is being generated. And I realize there are artists who are out there using it as a tool, and hopefully that is where it goes rather than taking over the work of an artist. But what AI has led me to reflect on is that I think as we move forward as artists, the process and the engagement in the creation, that is our most valuable thing that comes out of creating art. AI is that end product, but and when you start to recognize AI, you start to recognize the soullessness about it too.
Yeah.
But puppetry brings back that process and that being in that messy middle of trying to figure things out. And like I said before, that messy middle is what art is all about. But I think that, I think that we are craving that. We're craving that experience and that realness. So not only as artists who are creating the puppets and creating the shows and going through that mess and that struggle, we crave that and we need that. But our audiences feel it. Whether they recognize that that's what they're feeling that there's something genuine there, and puppetry is genuine. Yeah.
It actually made me think of two things. The first was how, as a puppeteer, as a artist, maker, creator, everything's a puppet show. And I really want to do a puppet show about AI fingers and how it can't make hands.
Yeah.
I haven't figured out what the story is going to be, but there need to be hands with too many fingers that bend in the wrong way, and eating spaghetti. If I could combine those into one puppet show, I could validate AI. I could be like, yeah, you're a tool. Thanks, bud. Secondly, it made me think of the importance of permanence and archival material. And like you've had Kevin Smith recently, past weeks or so, talking about how people who own hard copies of things like DVDs, Blu-rays, VHS are the keepers of that media. And I know I personally still have way too many VHSs because I cannot find some of those on DVD, let alone Blu-ray. And then you find people who make the illustrations. You still can have the original drawing. You still can have the original puppet after people. I mean, we were talking about the German puppets that I've brought in to the space as the show and tell for people to learn different kinds. We're able to hold on to those. We're able to learn from those. We're able to keep teaching about those. And I think that's a large part of why physical theater, physical art is so important, because we might find it in a pile one day and go, oh, cool, what is this? Let's look about it. As opposed to, like, as you brought up AI, there's no source, there's no research, there's no life behind that. There's no, and I mean, the thought that's usually behind that is, this is representative of the artist whose work got uploaded, and now we take pieces of that now that they're gone and they don't get the credit, but it looks a lot like theirs. And it's got such a, just leaves a bad taste in my mouth every time I hear of another artist who's like, there was a really famous artist whose name I cannot remember, that's how famous they are, who died, and all of their artwork got uploaded online and instantly put into an AI generator, and that's how the AI was making art, right? Yeah. It was based on somebody else's art, and it was no longer attributed to them. And that there's a lot of artists who are finding that, right? Yeah. Where they'll get like shot for shot pictures of, this is mine though. I have the files, I have the drawings, and yeah, there's just so much people thinking ownership without responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, on the AI subject, it's come a long way in the past couple of years, but it's still like even from a chat GPT kind of thing, like if you're writing a letter or an essay, I can tell if it's been written by that, because it's like, it's super formulated.
Yes.
And no writer would write like that, ever. Yeah. And even some of the images and videos that they're creating, they look spectacular.
but it's somebody
But
else's work to get there.
Yeah, and it still looks fake. Like
Yeah.
people look like, yes, they look more real, but they look like
Fake real?
Primus.
It's getting
like
that.
it looks like Primus. It's
Yeah,
like
that
plasticky
uncanny
people.
valley, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
it looks human, but we know it's not, and it
Yeah.
makes us uncomfortable.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
It always makes me almost think of a post-apocalyptic world where, okay, we have all this info that's on computers, but, imagine, just having the tangible item in your hand, like going through ruins after society's collapsed, you'll still find puppets.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what you'll find
Yeah,
the
yeah,
pile
yeah.
and say, what can we do with this? But
Yeah.
unless you have a screen,
yeah, the tangible thing is, I think that's a great point that you made there. And yeah, with the Kevin Smith thing, like,
we're the keepers of that media. We're the keepers of that knowledge, right?
yeah, and that's the thing. It's like Dogma. Like you can't find Dogma on a streaming service because he doesn't own the rights to
Yeah.
that. But I own a VHS copy and a DVD, so it's like I watch it all the time, and I like having that physical
Yeah.
DVD copy. It's
Or even Super Deluxe. They were, I can't remember if they were with College Humor or they were with Adult Swim, one of them, but something swallowed up Super Deluxe, and there were so many cool things on there that I reference all the time, but I can't show anybody because whoever swallowed it wiped the internet of it. And a lot of the creators who made those artworks, like there's certain music videos and stuff that were animated that I reference, they have no control about that because they made it for the company owned the work, and now nobody has those files anymore. That's considered like lost media. But something I love about lost media is the entire lost media community online, where they'll be like, yeah, but I filmed that commercial as part of this as part of this sports event in 1983 on a VHS. I'll upload it. So all we can hope is this lost media can be found again, and that only happens with, physical, tangible materials like puppets, VHSs, weird recordings, USB sticks. There's just responsibility behind ownership kind of deal.
so if I were to want to start like becoming a puppeteer.
Do it.
Awesome. Okay, sold. That's it, everybody. No,
Let's go.
Start by coming to one of their workshops.
yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
ask
Come to
you.
the Dolly
like,
Wiggler if you're an
Yeah.
adult for sure. You'll get you'll just get so much weird stuff thrown at you, and you'll go, wow, it could be anything. Like Jenny brought up WP Puppets and their own festival. Part of the Ideas Festival last year was a talk with artists, and they just make puppet shows out of garbage bags. The mouths are the openings, and they have whole stories. Do it.
Yeah.
Do the thing that you want to do. Just do it. We got YouTube now. Load it on the internet. Someone will like it.
is there
Her
any?
7-year-old has 10 subscribers. If her 7-year-old can have 10 subscribers on YouTube, you can do puppets.
Fair. Is there any organizations within the city people can
So
go
many.
to? Do you recommend any?
Yep. So Chaos, Calgary Animated Object Society. Christine Cook is very much the heart and soul of the puppetry community. Everybody knows her. Everybody loves her. She's inspired so many people. She got the Arts Award for Calgary a couple of years ago. So she's an incredible human, and Chaos is great. Also because I work there. So. And then Jenny brought up WP Puppets. Wendy does some incredible workshops all year round. I'll let you talk.
No, I was going to recommend WP Puppet
WP.
Theater because and she does. Wendy's really dedicated the last 30 plus years of her life to applied puppetry. So looking at how puppetry can be applied in therapeutic situations or in education, and she does a lot of work with seniors, and the programs that they've developed are really spectacular programs, and she's truly passionate about that work. So like Tia says, she has workshops running throughout the year as well. But I think like me, who just showed up to Puppet Jam and suddenly
thing.
found herself in Dolly Wiggler, although I had been working on puppets prior to that. But that's
so many people don't truly get started till they meet Christine, and then they're just
and then Christine
just
says,
launched onto
"Oh yeah,
the
Christine
stage.
says, yeah, you're on stage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay.
you haven't applied yet? You're in.
But I think that I think what we're getting to here is that there are many points of entry, I guess, to come into puppetry. Even yesterday, I ran an adult workshop making wooden tabletop puppets. And the work that came out of there, I am still on this high because I cannot believe the creativity. But just that idea that they've created this character that can now move. And now the character says to them, I want a story. Tell me my story. And they will start to tell the story. And then, ta-da, like there's your start. And then then maybe you start reaching out to other people in the community, mentors or organizations like Chaos and like WP Puppet.
And we show up everywhere. Like we're at Folk Fest, we're at Beakerhead, we're at Chinook Blast. We're either performing this, doing workshops, Market Collective. We're at those sometimes. Like Jenny, as an artist in residence in schools, like companies like Chaos have done like school residencies. We also did a Blackfoot language animation program, where we went into a school, taught a bunch of people animation, and they're making like it started with Celestine Twig, and she wants to make like a Sesame Street for Blackfoot. And the first group was a grade 9 group in Fort McLeod, Livingstone range, down there. And they went in, each group of kids made several videos. They animated things like hello and numbers and stuff like that. And then the next group were like more adult animators and beginners, and they did things like hello, how are you, where do you live? So we're everywhere. You just gotta look for us. Like most art things, whatever you like, it probably exists. Right. Which can be unfortunate, but also really encouraging.
And I think as soon as you start noticing it, you'll notice it everywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because we are everywhere.
Yeah.
Like we do tours of seniors' homes too. Wendy has a lot of work in seniors' homes, which is really encouraging to see how something like puppetry and mask workshops can help bring a little bit more joy to seniors. Started during COVID. We would perform outside of the windows, right? Because they couldn't come outside, we couldn't go in. But yeah, we're everywhere. Just go like Mask and Puppetry Calgary. Huzzah.
Yeah, and I'm glad we had this conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I think the one thing I'm taking away from this conversation especially is that when you're talking about doing puppetry with the kids and also with adults and seniors, how it's all about play.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And even as adults and seniors, probably we were all those kids at one point. We all love it, and we've just forgotten maybe how to play.
Yeah.
So I think that's the joy of puppetry. It reminds us of simpler times when we were younger. And I want to go to the dollar store and make a puppet.
Do it. Do it.
Do it.
Just bringing back my childhood so much. And how much it meant. And it's blowing me away talking about this, just how it requires so many disciplines, like to be a puppeteer. Like,
it requires what you are good at.
Yeah.
Like
too.
you can always learn more, but the thing you're good at already probably can be used.
Excellent.
Yeah. It's great.
Like a piece of written paper on a fishing hook, that's a puppet. Yeah.
Something I can do.
Exactly.
I'm going to try it later.
Got to start somewhere.
American Beauty filmed a paper, like a floating bag in wind.
Oh,
that's a puppet.
Yeah.
That's a puppet.
So you're on your way.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us for conversation. We're the Artsy Dudes. I'm Taylor Gladue, and as always,
Ryan Eliason, and it was great to be in Sparrow Art Space for the first time.
Yeah.
Feeling good.
Thank you again
Thank
for
you.
joining us. And yeah.